Today I'm going to change things up again and do some more experimenting. So I've got the Bob's Red Mill shredded coconut, which I'm going to make coconut milk out of in order to make coconut yogurt. And then I'm going to compare it to the canned coconut milk that I've been using for most of the yogurts that I've made. So this is 3 cups here of the shredded, roughly. It's a little bit over 3 cups, pretty close though. And I'm going to pour in 3 cups of hot water. Last time I did 4 cups, and this is just about boiling. This time I'm doing 3 because I want it to be a little bit thicker if that's at all possible. So we'll see how that goes. Now what I'm also going to do is bring it up to a boil on the stove just to make sure that I'm getting it as hot as possible. I know some people like to soak it in boiling water for quite some time. And in the meantime, alongside it, I'm going to start the chaws to make the coconut yogurt as I usually do. And again, this is with the Reuteri, and I'm going to be using a starter from a second batch that I've made previously. And I'm also going to add in a little bit of, like, just 1 capsule each of Reuteri probiotic as well, in order to make sure I'm definitely getting enough probiotic in there. So there is the 1 teaspoon of coconut sugar that I'm adding in for the probiotics to feed on. And then I'm adding in just about 2 teaspoons of agar-agar. I had been previously doing just 1 teaspoon for the 2 cans, but I accidentally added in more for one of my previous batches and found that I really like the consistency better with a little bit more. It does get thicker and there's a lot less water to worry about. So, and it didn't get like gummy or anything. It just turned into a thicker yogurt. So it's kind of nice that way. So that's what I'm going to do with both of these batches. So I am doing pretty much 2 full teaspoons for the canned coconut milk, and then I'm doing a little less than that for the shredded coconut milk because that is not as much. There's a little bit less actual fluid there that I'm going to be working with for that one because I'm using a more condensed version of this coconut milk. So mix it all in, and that does take some work because it's a little thicker. And I did have a little bit of lumps that I needed to kind of work out as well, but that was okay. I think it actually in the end just really kind of mixes in by itself anyway. And I actually didn't bother with the frother for this point because I was busy focusing on all of this and trying to get it done at the same time. And let me tell you, this little project was quite the project to do with chronic fatigue and chronic brain fog and all that fun stuff. This was a little more than I normally like to do, but I really was excited to get it done and to see how it all came out. And I'll give you a little spoiler that I'm really glad I did it. And I am using more of the coconut fiber left over from the previous batch of coconut milk that I made from shredded coconut. So I had just baked that a little bit and then got it browned, and then it works really nicely as my prebiotic to add in here. So, and I know my stomach can handle that much better than inulin, so it's kind of a nice option. And we're just sticking with the coconut theme all the way through here. And there I'm trying to just work out the lumps, and then that's ready to go. Gave this one a little stir. What was quite fascinating was how hot it stayed. I guess the way that the shredded coconut is, when you add some water in, it just holds the heat. So, because this was quite a while. I mean, we've got it all sped up here, but it stayed hot for a long time. I left it for more than an hour, and it just really didn't cool down a whole lot. So I went ahead and added it into the Vitamix anyway, although again, it was a little hotter than I would have liked to put in the Vitamix, but I really needed to get things going. And actually, I didn't realize how hot it was until I ran it through the Vitamix, that it was still definitely quite warm. So I turned the Vitamix on and immediately discovered that this is going to be a little more of a challenge than I thought. I have rarely found things that I mix in this unit that make it actually difficult for the motor, but this did a little bit, oddly, because it doesn't look like it's all that bad, but it was really, really working hard, and you can kind of smell it. So that is the absolute most I'd ever want to push that Vitamix, and that tells me right there that next time I'm going to need to do equal amounts water to equal amounts shredded coconut, or even more water if I wanted to make something else. But definitely having less water than coconut turned out to be a little more than the machine really liked. It worked out okay. And you can see my husband there kind of smelling it because it seemed kind of weird. And I did get my nut milk bag. Actually, it was 2 in that brand. And I just bought it from Canada, Amazon. So if you have access to that, you can get it there. I'm not sure if you can get it in other Amazons. And I've learned this really cool trick, thankfully, before I even got the milk bag. And that was to turn it inside out before you use it. And that way, all of the seams are on the outside so that there is less for the coconut fiber to get stuck in. And I am so glad I knew that tip because I think it was great. It really worked out well. You can kind of see, because this is sitting in the sunshine, that there's cat hairs and stuff everywhere. I mean, it just blows my mind that I've been able to make as much coconut yogurt as I have, especially for the longer term at the lighter temperatures, and not have it go moldy. The only 2 that I had go mold was those Mercola ones that I tried, that it was actually the probiotic itself that was the problem, and I'm thankful that they replaced it for me. That was great. So from here, then there's just squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. And yes, it's very hot, and I do have nerve issues in my fingers and my hands. So that was also really not pleasant for me, but I did as best I could and eventually got to a point where I asked my husband to come and finish it for me because I was out of energy trying to make it happen. So you see his arms come in and replace mine for a little bit, squeezing it. And then he actually says something funny there that I'm just going to include in here because he was just kind of blown away with how much work it takes to get the water out. And again, if I add equal amounts of water to shredded coconut, that should solve a lot of that problem. It will still be a challenge, but nowhere near like this was. This was very difficult to get it all out.
Run over it with my truck. We'll put it in like a pan.
Okay.
And then we'll run over it with the truck, and then all the juice will go in the pan. Holy!
So at this point I decided to measure how much extra. I really wanted to get that full 3 cups back from what I added in, but I couldn't quite get enough. So ultimately I decided, again, I'm adding this back in and not worrying too much about the fibers that are left in there because I'm going to be adding some fiber in as the prebiotic. So that's kind of handy. I don't have to rinse it out or anything. And dumping out the nut milk bag was super easy, and I'm so glad it's inside out. That worked out awesome. Got all the fibers out and was much easier to clean. My husband actually grabbed that and cleaned it right away for me, and he had no problems, so that was awesome. And now we've got all of this dried coconut that just needs to be baked till it's just lightly browned, and then we've got a really nice flour, or well, it's fiber and prebiotic that we can use for all kinds of things. And then I will add in some water eventually to balance that back out. So a little bit more hot water in at this point just to make sure that I'm back up to full 3 cups so that I've got a good amount for that batch. It's too bad it worked out to have to be that way, but this is just a learning process for me. So I think in the end that was a good decision to make. So back into the pot, and I'm mixing in the agar-agar here, and then I'm going to get it up to a boil just to make sure that we're absolutely killing anything that might have ended up in there. Because technically I didn't get it up to a full boil when I first soaked it. It was freshly boiled water, but not at a full boil. So we want to make sure that we're really killing anything we don't want in there. So we dump that in, and then coconut sugar, same thing, 1 teaspoon. And then I did about 1.5 tablespoons of the shredded coconut, and that was the fresh batch there that I just added back in. And make sure that it got up to a good boil, and then let her cool. And I'm trying to cool it faster now in the cold water because, as you can see, the canned coconut milk yogurt that I'd been making and just letting sit to cool more slowly, because of the extra agar-agar, it actually did start to firm up quite a bit. So I actually had to mix it around quite a bit and get it to loosen up again so that I could mix in the probiotic. And it was down to a nice low temperature. So now it's time to scoop in my 2 tablespoons of my probiotic starter from a previous batch. And then dump that into the jar to get ready for the maker. And then also I'm going to add in just 1 capsule of the BioGaia. So that's just a small amount, and it's nowhere near enough for doing a batch on its own, but I'm just adding a little bit extra in. So so that you guys understand, I know you've asked before when I do add in an extra one with my starter, is that there's no way for me to check and see just exactly how much probiotic I'm getting here. So I just like to be a little extra cautious and add in as much as possible without blowing too much money whenever possible. And then I really had to mix that in to make sure that it was getting to every nook and cranny. Put that in the maker, and you can see that it's already on because I wanted to get the temperature of the water up so that I'm not waiting for hours and hours for it to get up to where it needs to be, because I have no idea how long that would take if you just put cold water in. And now we have got the cooled shredded coconut milk that I've made, and I'm adding in the 1 capsule and then the same batch of starter. And give that a good mix. And you can see this one, as it got cooled down too, it did get kind of thicker quicker. Even though it wasn't like really cold, it was still already thickening up quite a bit. So that's something I have to keep in mind when I'm using a little bit more agar. Agar is just going to be thicker before it even goes in the yogurt maker. And I put it into the measuring cup here because that makes it so much easier to pour in. Otherwise, just scooping it in tends to make a big mess and it goes everywhere. So this actually worked out really well. I didn't have any cleanup from pouring into these little jars. They're really good little jars, but it is a little bit finicky trying to get it all in there. So I'm glad to have something with a spout. I think pretty much anything with a spout would do the job. So in they all go, and I actually unplugged the yogurt maker and then plugged it back in and reset it, and I'm setting it at 91 degrees. So that's significantly lower than you normally would, but that seems to be what's the range that I'm going to need. And then I set it for more than 36 hours just so I had options for when I'm getting up in the morning. And with 26 hours left, I give it a check on the big batch there, which is the canned coconut milk. And it did get up to 104, which isn't great, but it's workable. So, okay. And again, checking it the next day, same thing. Now, this is where I figured something out, I think, that I needed to know probably a lot sooner, and that is that if you're doing a big container versus the small containers, you get different temperatures. So where we're at 104 with the big one, we got up to 97 with the small ones. So I would set the temperature a little bit closer to 100 if I'm doing all small containers, and I would set it down to maybe 89, 90 for the big containers. And now I know. Now I have a pretty good idea. So mixing them up like this isn't ideal, but it's workable. It's just not the best if you really want to have absolute control of your temperature. So now I know that the best thing to do is do just 2 big jars or do the 8 small jars and then set the temperature accordingly. Set it higher for the small jars and lower for the big jars. So that's my little tip for today using the Ultimate Probiotic Maker. And although the temperatures are not exactly where you want it, you would hope you could set it at 100 degrees and that it would actually keep your yogurt at 100 degrees. That's not how it works. So you have to play around with it and see what yours is doing. It's depending on things like, as someone pointed out in one of the comments, the altitude that you're at and your humidity levels, the temperature of the room. All of these kinds of things can affect what temperature it's going to hold at. So, but I am very happy to see that I've got options there, and this is the newest replacement that they've given me that does have the little prong sticking up there to check the temperature. And what I tried to do as best I could is move the big container as close to that monitor as I could so that it would be hopefully detecting the temperature of the yogurt, not just the water, or pretty close to it anyway, to give it a little bit more stability. So I think that might have been helpful, but I can't say for sure. And then opening it up, when it's ready to go, I check the temperature again, and I start with the the small containers. And again, we're still a little below 100, which is okay. That's a decent place. I probably would like it to be up to 100, but a little bit below is okay. And then the large container, we're still at 104, even up to 106, a little bit there. So again, a little bit higher than I would normally like, but workable. So that is fine. So then I take these out and open the lids up, and everything smells good and looks good. And then I also gave each batch a little try, and everything tastes great. I would say that the small containers, which is the shredded coconut milk yogurt that I made, is a little bit creamier and not as tart, whereas the canned coconut milk is a little bit less creamy and maybe a little bit more tart, but they're still very, very mild, especially for 36 hours, which is, I've found, pretty standard with the Reuteri probiotic, in that it doesn't make it a really, really tart flavor, and that's okay. I like tart flavor, but it doesn't have to be. So there's lots of things we can do to mix around depending on what particular probiotic that we're working with. So overall, I would call this a success. And I'm still learning with the shredded coconut milk, and I still have lots of canned coconut milk left too. So I'm going to keep on playing around with both of those. Obviously, I'm pretty well stocked up now with the Reuteri. So I've got that going, and we'll see what next I want to make. I've got some other things that I need to work on. I think I will not make the Mega Spore Biotic yogurt again anytime soon, because I was struggling with that one. But we have lots of other options out there, and I would like to try some of the different recommendations as well that I have not tried yet. So we'll keep going with that. And I'm also thinking that these yogurt makers must be great for making fermented vegetables, which I have made before just at room temperature. But now that we have to keep my home pretty cold for me because of my health issues, that was not really going to be an option so much, because it just doesn't get warm enough for it to really ferment the way that we need it to. So these yogurt makers would be perfect, especially in the larger containers, just to stick those in there and probably bring them up to a bit lower temperature, maybe not up to a full 100. I might want to have it down to in the 80s or maybe low 90s. So we'll see how that works. And definitely when I get a chance to start working on that, I have definitely made lots of fermented cabbage in the past. I've made sauerkraut, a variety of different kinds with different vegetables in the past, and generally found them to be excellent and very easy to do, although it's a bit labor intensive to get started, but then it's fantastic. And I'm just thinking, having these yogurt makers now, that they could be a great way to make that happen too. Not to mention the fact that you keep a lid on it, so that's helpful too, because fermenting cabbage does not make your house smell very good. It's worth it in the end, I promise, but yeah, it's not ideal for how your house smells. So that's what I'm going to look into next and see where we go. In the end, I'm still having a lot of fun making this coconut yogurt, and I am really appreciating all the comments, and I'm glad that these videos are helpful for you guys too. So thank you for watching, and God bless.